Right, welcome everybody to today's Regional Transport Committee meeting. Start with a Karakia. Hope we can all work in a constructive manner today for the betterment of our district and going forward, and I welcome all your input into this meeting. Thank you. First of all, any apologies? None. Declarations of interest. Confirmation of the non-confidential minutes. Can I have a mover and a second to the true and correct record, please? Jeremy? Colin. Are there any matters arising from these minutes? I have a couple. First one is around the Regional Transport Committee, where we're looking into having a induction session. Yes. Can we sort of progress this and maybe get a date locked in?
There is a date locked in. I think it's, bear with one moment, Chair, I think it's next week or the following week. Maybe it's the following week. Yes, it is locked in for Wednesday the 18th. I think it's tagged on at the end of one of your other meetings. I have you in my diary for 2:15 on Wednesday the 18th.
Yeah. Yes, we have following the finance and performance.
Yes,
Everybody got that in their calendar?
Yeah. It was supposed to be in December, but
yeah,
I was not here.
That's right, that's good.
Apologies.
And the second one was we talked about further discussion last Regional Transport meeting on expanding the membership of the Regional Transport Committee. We haven't progressed that anymore, but we did have discussions around it. Suggestion of somebody from the heavy haulage industry that basically travelling outside our region and using the highways. I think that would be quite a good advocacy group to hear it from. That gives us real feed of how the actual on-ground side of it's going. And the other suggestion is the police, because they can give us updates pretty regularly on the roading network and the effects of how lots of holding concerts here and that sort of thing, the extra people coming in and out of this region is. So are there any other suggestions anybody's got? They feel maybe we can always add something more at a later date if we feel that it's warranted, but we want to make sure. Nadine?
Thank you. Through the Chair, can I suggest in the report 2636 we'll just include, so your first one around appointment of a Deputy Chairperson, will include a recommendation in there to that the committee resolves to include two community representatives, and I'll capture that we wanted the police and the heavy haulage person, so that can go out there and do the recruitment.
Okay. Anybody else got any suggestions on that? Anything else within the minutes want to discuss? No. If not, can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes? Here I've already got that, sorry. Right, we'll get this right one day. Right, moving on. Government's work plan, you've all got that in front of you. There's an updated one, a couple of extras in here, so we'll be dealing with those all today. No leave of absence, acknowledgements and tributes, nothing. Public inputs and petitions, nothing. Extraordinary business, nothing. Notice of motions, adjourned business. So we'll move on to the Chief Executive and Staff report. Appointment of a Deputy Chairperson of the Regional Transport Committee. So can I call for nominations, please?
Nominate Colin.
Colin. Seconded by Jeremy. All those in favour, raise your arms. Aye. Carried. Congratulations, Colin. Also, as part of that, we will look for and contact people from the police and the heavy transport industry to come onto this committee to give us input. So,
Chair, so I think there's been comment to about a disability advocate in AA in previous ones. Is there any interest in that as well?
okay. So we're open to people feel we're getting value, like it's, yeah. Anyone want to discuss anything around that?
Maybe it's depending on the agenda as to who's sort of required, maybe. If there's a lot on that certain topic, it might make sense to have someone from the area present just for that meeting, but not every meeting. Maybe.
Okay, happy with that?
Through the chair, so would that recommendation be, the additional recommendation 2 be agrees to include additional representation of the RTC being from police, heavy freight sector and what's the other one? And shall I just keep it open, one additional?
On a case by case was what?
Yeah, on a case by, we'll tidy up there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Move on to coming up issues. I'll get Tina to come up and speak to the next report, Regional Land Transport Plan and Regional Public Transport Work Programme.
Thanks. So this RLTP and RPTP program and approach paper is for decision, so that just for you to endorse the program, confirm the approach, the sequencing and the governance. It doesn't lock in any projects or budgets at this stage. And also for endorsing the total mobility submission form at the end. So yeah, RLTP, RPTP, statutory requirements under the Land Transport Act. RLTP is a gateway for the National Land Transport Fund investment. Obviously, I've given you a RLTP introduction last year, and a state of transport report as well. So this program follows that on, and lists things like the ILM workshops that we've got in March. Now put that into the governance work programs, workshops in there after each sort of RLTP. So we're going to go quickly in the afternoon, if that suits. And we'll do things like refresh evidence, because we're getting evidence packs from NZTA throughout the year. Identification will be happening through the AMPs, so there'll be a chance for us to workshop that material as it comes out. And then later on, option development and prioritisation and time and alignment with the LT, the long-term planning and investment online applications for the NTP. And yeah, then there'll be draft plans, consultation later in the year, adoption of those for consultation next year, hearings, and adoption eventually next year, middle of next year. So we're kind of in the middle of everything right now of the 2024 RLTP. And we're basically we've done the strategic network resilience case, and we're building on from that. So once starting from scratch, trying to fill it out, we're just consolidating, positioning from our past strategic decisions, collating with our AMPs, NZTA, obviously, their fund, or our network goes through this RLTP as well, and positioning ourselves for dealing with more heavy freight and better regional connectivity. So attachments to this report, there's an NZIER report summary. This is providing an independent economic evidence of benefits for State Highway 2 resilience between here and Napier. There is still a really strong need for strategic freight and lifeline route resilience as part of a national supply chain, so, and to cope with peak demands and climate change. So that's why that's there, and the total mobility submission attachment is about feedback on fare and ride plans. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? I have a couple. Look, just on page 14 for a start. Page 14 for a start. I just, point 17, when we look at our 2027 to 37 RLT, will therefore bundle freight resilience and network reliability outcomes into the single integrated investment narrative. And then if we move on to point 24, or 23 and 24, is going over HBRED, NZIER economic research report that they did on the freight and the importance of the route between here and Napier. And point 24 then goes on to say, the performance and resilience of the corridor has significant implications. I'm just wondering whether or not this is a good time to, there's been quite a bit of work done by John Wells on a route from Tutera that turns off and comes out on the Napier-Taupo road. Now that road from both ends has been upgraded and tar sealed over the years, and this has been looked into. This isn't new. This was looked into quite a long time ago. Now there's only about 4 k's, I think it is, in the middle. It's not linked up, and that is linked up by a forestry road. Okay, a bit more than 4, but it's a piece in the middle that's as an actual forestry road that could be then looked at getting access and upgraded for emergencies. Because if we look at that, the situation we've been in at the moment with everybody in freight having to go right around, plus the vulnerability of we've seen with Devil's Elbow, that route actually cuts 46 kilometres off that trip. So if you add that in as well as the vulnerability, I think it's probably, and with what we're dealing with at the moment, it's probably a good time to maybe have a look at that or talk to the powers and be about it. So just any thoughts or discussion on that, considering what we're also doing here.
How can we push that? Can we move an investigation for this? Or a request to...
Linda, have you got any input into that?
If your officer wants to respond first, I don't want to cut across.
It'd
be a local road, so I'd be out of my scope to
be a
comment.
local road in Hawke's Bay as well, so it's out of our scope, but we're wanting to progress that regional resilience case, which we've had in the 2024 marked as probable. So we're still talking through with NZTA about progressing that. So it's good that you want that, because that's at place the fact that we need to do a case like this. So,
yeah, because it's not really the huge benefit to Hawke's Bay, because they're at the other end of it. It's actually the benefit from the Wairoa-Gisborne region. So yeah, even though it's in Hawke's Bay and it's outside of our jurisdiction and even NZTA's jurisdiction, because it's a local road, I think it'd be great if we could look at least start talking to them about it, how we do progress.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, so John in the past, he's been promoting this for a long time. Whenever the gorge, situations when the gorge has been out, he's been directed to NZTA Hawke's Bay office and doesn't get much back. But yeah, massive benefits to, I mean, it's taking that 45 minutes or so off the route into central North Island that way. And it's the NZ case there, sort of backs it up too, is networking into Hawke's Bay. I took this proposal to the Chamber of Commerce a bit over a week ago, and in principle the Chamber is really supportive of I know some of our operators, but Leaderbrand in particular is really keen for this proposal to be looked into.
I'll comment through you, Chair, in that regard. Just as note, we work as one organisation, so Hawke's Bay office and their response is representative of all of us. But I think the important part here is that as the road controlling authority, we are responsible for the levels of investment and the resilience and performance of the state highway asset. And the levels of investment that we've seen, for example, at that end, we've got over $1 billion going into that section of State Highway 2 from the Hawke's Bay Expressway through to Waikari Gorge, and then a substantial investment on the Devil's Elbow. So I think that underscores and recognises the importance that we place on the resilience of that route. Should local government and the RCAs, so in this particular instance, Hastings, Wairoa and also Gisborne District Council wish to look at viable alternatives in terms of detour routes, there are agreements between RCAs on detour routes and their efficacy for use in different situations for different vehicle types. Absolutely, you can have a look at that collectively. And we would be interested to understand the transport outcomes that that delivers. It would always be weighed up in terms of prioritisation and investment needs versus every other aspect that you'd be looking for collectively. So the work that NZIER does and to demonstrate the economic as well as the social, cultural connectivity that a detour route could provide would be important to making a case for that investment. But certainly that would be something that local authorities and their RCAs would need to have a look at rather than it being led by NZTA. Our emphasis is on the performance of the state highway.
Just a supplementary is that there's a need for a bridge there too over the east river.
So out of that, could we move that we contact the Hawke's Bay councils, Hastings Regional Council, whoever has got jurisdiction through that area, and start having that talk?
Okay. Just one more point. While I believe you got probable funding through the NLTF for that piece of work, I understand that Hawke's Bay was only possible funding for their part of the work, so they do not have access to that funding to progress the business case work that you're referring to. I know that we are in discussions with them to see what can be done to support the progress of that. But I think probably need to ensure that we come together to have a look at the direct transport outcomes, i.e. roading transport outcomes that come from that. At the moment, the indications look like it's more aligned to perhaps rail and coastal shipping. So I think there's just a bit of further work to be done there. But you'll need to make sure that we link in with your southern counterparts on their ability to fund that, which we're across.
Okay, has anybody else got anything in this paper they want clarification or anything on? If not, I'm going to move on a second to the paper.
I'll move.
Jeremy, thank you.
I just have a comment. Just want to draw people's attention to the excellent risk table that's on page 25, and there are just a couple to note, particularly GPS alignment. officers have previously reported that we are waiting for a draft GPS to come out early this year, which we'll just need to make sure that we keep across and are aware of as we develop our RLTP. The important part there is that it's aligned to government priorities, noting as well that there's a significant event happening in November of this year too, which could attribute further changes to transport outcomes. So as quite rightly it's shown there, that is a high risk for us through our RLTP process, and ensuring that we align with that to attract the right levels of investment for the type of work we've just discussed, sorry.
Right, on the next paper we've got is an information paper. Tina's presenting that again, Introduction to Investment Logic Mapping.
Cool. So it's just information only. It's to prepare for the upcoming ILM workshops, which are in March the 5th and I want to say 15th, I can't remember, sorry. But we've got 2 dates there locked in now. That should be in your calendars. Oh, it'll be written. Oh no, yeah, she's not. Anyway. So this paper just sort of explains why we need to do this and what it's all about. You don't need to do any pre-reading or anything like that other than this report will be attached to the workshop online and it's public, but it's not being recorded. That's what I understand. So the ILM marks the point where the RLTP program moves from context setting to a structured problem definition. It's nationally used, Treasury embedded framework. It's used to test whether the investment story is logical and evidence-based. And outputs include an investment logic map and the benefits management tool. So it acts as an early risk management tool using late-stage rework or rework. It builds on previous ILM work, which is already in the 2024 RLTP. I think there's a little diagram in there, which, well, that shows those sort of 3 problems weighted that's in our current RLTP. And yeah, that weighting is used later on in the year for prioritisation against projects, along with things like transport outcomes and long-term plan objectives and project readiness and lots of things like that. So we'll hear a big thing of that. It's particularly important to get this right in Tairāwhiti because we carry national freight, tourism and lifeline functions. We experience irregular demand peaks and climate-driven disruption is normal. And we face risks that are not well captured by the population-based funding metrics that are some population, so it's tricky here. The ILM will be facilitated by Kim Aldridge from DHD. He has been here before and done this with some of you previously. So you guys will hear more about it than me. I went through that last time. Workshop 1 will be problem trajectories, cause and consequence mapping, and here we'll go through everyone, talk to you, make sure everyone has a say. He's really good at facilitating that. Workshop 2, he's online, but we'll just sort of finish it off with the work. It's not as big as the first one. Yeah, the outputs will be reported back to LTC in the next meeting and used to guide the next stages.
So any questions on that, Colin?
Yes, Chair. Just a question. In your opinion, would the local transport committee benefit from taking part in that?
Oh yeah, they are. Sorry, some of those. Yeah, they are invited as
3
well.
of us are here already, but by inviting another 3, would that be?
So the invite's gone to all prisoners. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? If not, can we move in and second for the paper? Teddy? Yep. Colin, thank you. Right, moving on to our next paper is regional update, and Linda's going to do this for us. Which I'm presuming is the same as we had in regional transport, so anyone that's online, this is, that you missed this morning's local transport.
Not at all the same.
Not at all the same.
No, that's a trek update,
Right.
so that's got specific recovery focus from Gabrielle.
Yep.
Whereas this is the national view on the land transport system and some of the key aspects that governance needs to be aware of, as well as some local updates and other aspects from an operational perspective you should be aware of as well.
Good, thank you.
So first of all, and in relation to previous agenda items, we've discussed the development of the next RLTP and NLTP process. Also in that great risk table was reference to FAR, your funding assistance rate. So just an update here on that process. You'll be aware that for each NLTP period and for each National Land Transport Fund, our board reviews and sets the FAR rates for all of our local government partners, our RCAs. The timeline that we're working towards confirming that, because it is important for your wider financial planning, as well as for your transport planning. They'll be getting confirmed in August 2026. So just to be clear, this is the NLTF contribution towards your local road funding, as well as some other aspects that we fund in partnership with you around public transport, for example. The average right across the country is 53%. And I think, my goodness, what are we here? We're 68%, I think. FARs are all published online, so you can have a look at all of the other FARs right across the country and where they sit at. But an important part to note from an affordability perspective, particularly in the current environment and some of the reforms that are proposed for local government. Just a brief update on the roads of national significance. That's a high priority in this government policy statement for transport and continuing right across the MOTU. Of particular note, more for the Central North Island, is the connectivity south from Tairafiti through the Hawke's Bay Expressway and then down into Wellington for Otaki to north of Levin. They are continuing and well underway now. And then through to the north, you have a number through the Bay of Plenty and also up into the Waikato. So again, these are priority for our current government and under the government policy statement, representing a significant investment into the land transport system right across, especially the North Island, as you can see there. National ticketing solution, so change of tact into public transport world. Thank you very much for your ongoing engagement into this. I know we've discussed it on and off for a while. The programme is now underway in Christchurch and reaping good results, both in terms of uptake and use, but also in the data that's being collected. In terms of the timeline, we're planning right across the country, particularly for our smaller regions, public transport regions. They're kind of all of mine, Taranaki, Manawatu, Wanganui, Hawke's Bay and Tairafiti, for those being phased in throughout 2026 and 2027. More detailed timings are being worked through with your officers and your team on how we progress that in each of the regions. And some of the regions have got quite specific requirements. They're trying to time it alongside changes in routes, changes in procurement and other parts of their planning. But a really great step into the future for public transport in New Zealand. Maintenance on a national basis. We have discussed this a little bit, is the shift away from our network outcomes contracts to our integrated delivery contracts right across the country. So prior to Christmas, we gave an update on how we were going with these, and we had just contacted all of the organisations that were involved in the final stage of the procurement process. We were confirming and have now confirmed, as you can see, the preferred suppliers for these next generation contracts. So they have by and large, not in every instance, a decade's worth of life to each of the contracts. Follows a significant procurement process to find the right contractor to maintain the right level of service and deliver the right outcomes that we need across each part of the network in each region. We're currently just in the final stages of negotiations of those contracts and the signing process, and we're expecting to have them completed by the end of the month, so the end of February. I would just note here as well that while we do have one single preferred contractor in each of those regions, the structure of the integrated delivery contracts do allow for both quality and an at-risk component of those individual contracts, as well as a set percentage of that work being out to open tender as well within the region. And that's to ensure that, given our procurement right across the country, that we provide support to progress local businesses and build up the local contractor market, not just provide all of the work to one contractor in each region. And an update, questions at the end here. An update on how we're progressing on the second priority through the GPS, and that is maintenance across the country. While we've yet again, as you are well aware, had some inclement weather and weather events through the summer, we're still on track to deliver over 2,000 lane kilometres of improvement, so road renewals and road seals by the end of the summer programme, which is really positive. We've had more consistent and greater focus on road rebuilds, which comes through in the Tairāwhiti data as well, and that's where we see the significant uplift to the quality of the asset rather than just continual reseals across the network. Bringing it a bit closer, and on that note, for the Tairāwhiti region, I would just say that these were just before the weather event. But we were on track. All rebuilds were complete on State Highway 35. Drainage renewals were also on track, which is one of the most important parts of preventative maintenance and resilience. And we were on track to deliver over 65 lane kilometres of road surface renewals right across the region. I would note that we will need to reassess the impacts on certain parts of the state highway, particularly on the southern part of 2 and the northern part of 35 for obvious reasons. We heard from Trek earlier, so I won't labour too much on this, but I just want to underscore the presentation from the previous committee that it has been very pleasing to see, both on a state highway, so the Trek projects, but also on the local roads, the work that has been undertaken through the recovery phase of Cyclone Gabrielle has held up very well to the recent weather event, and I think that's testimony to all of the collective teams and to the contractors that have been at work on this. And it does just show that when we get the right solutions in the right place at the right time, that it can support overall building better resilience into the network. So ka pai for all of the officers and their contractors as well. Just here post-Trek, so you may well be, we are getting questions as to what happens once Trek's work through the recovery and those 4 major projects are wrapped up and they are completed. This dovetails beautifully back into the conversation we're having on your regional land transport plan, and it underscores the importance of the work our officers and officials do together. So Trek will finish their recovery and we will collectively move back into continuing with our business as usual on maintenance of the state highway, and also looking at what further improvements need to happen on the state highway, noting that Trek don't do work on the local roads. So we are beginning to, here's a wonderful acronym, work on the SHIP, the State Highway Improvement Plan and Programme, and your input via your officers is critically important to us to make sure that we have the right improvements coming forwards into the 27 to 30 RLTP process. While not everything that's in there will be funded, if it's not in there, it will not be funded. So it is really important that we work on that hand in hand and we get your feedback through your officers into that, which I know that the team are beginning to work on together. And just lastly, as part of ministerial expectations and good practice, just working together to show how we're tracking across our activity classes on the drawdown on committed funding through this NLTP process. So we ran through this last time, but I know we've had a bit of a gap. The light blue line or column shows the total allocation to Gisborne District Council for 24-27. The dark blue bit shows how much of that's already been spent or drawn down. The hashed bit, if that's the right word, the stripy one, shows the run rate. So based on historical data and your spend, what would be required to use that whole allocation in the time that you have left. Now, you are tracking brilliantly. There's no issues and no flags there at all. You're probably looking at the emergency works that have got a bigger hashed line on there. Completely explainable, and I would say our officers and officials are working really closely together. This is coming down to phasing of particularly your dropouts and bridges. We're just working through deliverability, affordability and timing, and also community consultation. So where we had originally estimated something might happen, it's been reprioritised or moved out to allow for further work and understanding to be done. I have no red flags on here at all. And just want to as well just say that our officers just hand out a bouquet to your team and your council officers on the work that they've done here. Really, really good decision making is the feedback from our team. Really solid and sound planning and investment decisions to ensure that balance the financial and the needs of the community with some of the complexities that you've got there, and also as well to make sure that you're getting the right solution in place at the right time, that it's done in the right way and also in the right order right across your network. So while it looks like that hash box might be a bit bigger than you'd want, it's for sound rationale. So yeah, nice job to all of the officers that are involved there. And that's it, and happy to take any questions.
Jenny?
You mentioned those big contracts that part of it is a percentage of the work has to go to local contractors. Is there any measures in place in terms of type of work, dictating price, taking the cream jobs sort of thing? Like obviously going to take the cream jobs, and is there any measures in place?
Not quite sure what a cream job would be.
Well,
But we have, as part of how the contracts are structured, 80% of it is tendered to the one contractor that you noted. 20% of that 80% is at risk. So what that means is that if the quality, the performance, the management, if NZTA has any consistent issues, 20% of that contract can be at risk and be tendered out for another contractor to do. That leaves another 20% that will go out to the open market. Now, when I say open market, all contractors across the country have had the opportunity to be, gosh, what's the word, pre-qualified, and they're on like a directory or a list when work becomes available, and that can be anything from, say, challenging drainage and culvert works through to specific bridge works, through to drainage works, or complex or different types of rebuild, or it could be that they're very localised and special. They will all go out to that market, and those contractors will have the opportunity to tender for those. We've worked through quite a process to get that directory, if you like, built up, but it's not so much about kind of the cream jobs, so to speak. It's about looking at the capability that exists within a region, the type of work that would be beneficial for other and smaller contractors to be able to take advantage of in that region, or who might be better placed to do it than the main contractor, and making sure that we provide them with that opportunity to tender. I'm interested in what a cream job might be.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. In that last slide, the hatched area,
Yes.
that's the required run rate to achieve the goal.
The total allocation.
Yes. At what point do you start becoming concerned that the run rate's not enough? I know that one of them was quite long. Is it getting close to an alarm, or?
We, in how our officers and officials work together, it's kind of on a weekly and monthly basis. We're in that regular communication. So any alarm bells, and I would say genuinely over the past couple of years in particular, we've got in a much better way of working together. Any alarm bells are sounded quite early if there's any concerns, and understanding why. So hence why I mentioned that we don't need to be concerned about that in this instance. But overall, nationally, we do what's called a rebaselining each year to have a look at that, because what we don't ever want to happen is be in a position that, say, the pothole maintenance fund gets to the end of 27 and only 2/3 of it spent nationally, when, say, Gisborne District Council could have spent more, and it could be, reallocated. So there is a rebaselining portion. The crunchy part for us across all of our activity classes happens between now, so kind of 18 months through to the kind of end of this year. So having a look at how we would then say, well, genuinely, Gisborne District Council aren't going to be able to spend X millions of dollars on here. Would that be returned back to the activity class? When it comes back to the two examples on there, one of those was your NIWI funding, so that would not go back into the NLTF, for example. That's allocated to Gisborne District Council.
And pulling behind on your run rate, is part of the alarm bell the fact that maintenance might be falling behind and resilience isn't fully in place? Is that part of the alarm, or is it just a dollar thing?
It's definitely not a dollar thing. The dollar or the drawdown rate's usually the indicator rather than the rationale. So it could be affordability. Council could have made a decision that instead of using their local share on roading, they could have used it on water. So there could be a reprioritisation from your perspective. Or it could be that something is particularly difficult, and we originally estimated that it would take a year to design and build, and we now know after doing the investigations it would take 3 years to design and build. It could well be that there's capacity constraints in the market in terms of the right contractors and their availability to do the work. So it's really important that we understand why, and we understand that earlier, so that we can do things like support you with phasing of when the money's drawn down, and that we've got a clear picture as to what's going on and if there's support or any help needed. That's why I say in this instance there's no red flags for us at all. Your team are doing a cracking job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
Just a question on our preferred maintenance supplier having an asterisk with the it's a 3-year contract. Is that different from other suppliers, preferred suppliers around the country?
It is indeed. I love that you noted as well, Jeremy. It is indeed. So the term for Tairafiti is a 3-year contract rather than a 10-year contract. And while we're still in negotiations, so I can't get into the specific details on that, I think you can infer from that decision that there were still questions between both parties as to what was tendered and our confidence in that over a 10-year period. So we're working through that. The reason that it's 3 years, it will then time with other contracts, Taranaki and Waikato, which will come up for renewal at that, so we can then go out to the market at that stage. But we were very focused on what would provide the best long-term outcome for the region, and we did not have that to be able to sign a 10-year contract at this point. We've got 3 years until we get it nailed.
Anything else? No. I've just got one for you on the appendix, page 64, just on the Waikiri Gorge realignment.
Yes.
The closing statement there, construction will take about 4 years to complete. Does seem to me to be a very long time for 4 kilometres of roading in one bridge. Is that reality, or is that covering to say that this, it just seems a very, very long time for that length of roading?
A couple of things. Usually what happens before you get to dig anything up is where most of the time is taken, and that's particularly around property negotiations, consenting process and the detailed design. So that's where much of that rather than necessarily the build. Also as well, the let's just say it's not a nice big flat bit of land to just rock on up with a few diggers and carve out as well. So there are some complexities in the site for the realignment. So will it take the full 4 years? I'm probably not the best person to ask that. Might it be 6 months shorter or not? Potentially, but as I have learned in the world of roading, you never know what you're going to get under the ground until you dig it up. So we do have to make sure that we manage that. But certainly the property negotiations and consenting process is where we tend to take up the most time rather than the actual build.
Okay.
Hoping that we'll be able to move forwards on a sort of turning and getting it started sooner rather than later though, Chair.
Okay. There's nothing else. That brings us to our conclusion of our meeting. Mover, please. Jeremy and Teddy. Thank you. In favour? Aye. Thanks. Thank you. Look forward to some workshops.